In 2007, Mike Ashley finally stepped into the footballing game with the purchase of Newcastle United. Finally, after years of financial struggle, the club had a self-made billionaire who could finally bring the long-awaited success to St. James's Park. Well, what soon followed was a total disaster. Instead of elevating the club to new heights, this historic purchase had the opposite effect. Constant managerial changes, superstar players sold not to the benefit of the club, but to fill the pockets of an owner that cared very little in adhering to the club's values. And who could forget the club suffering relegation on 2 separate occasions? And even though the fans endured through this nightmare for 14 years, there was a glimmer of hope at the end. In 2021, a new owner stepped in, and this saw the club go from near relegation to Champions League football, a remarkable turnaround. But the question is, how was this even possible? In this video, that's exactly what we're gonna find out. It only took £134 million for Mike Ashley to become the owner of Newcastle United. Before Ashley bought the club, Newcastle United were on the London Stock Exchange, but after purchasing shares from Sir John Hall and Freddie Sherped, Ashley finally had what he wanted. Newcastle United became a privately owned company, with the fans optimistic on how far Ashley could take the club. But don't get it twisted, Ashley wasn't your typical businessman. He was opportunistic, risk adverse, and damn right controversial at times. And in this video, you're gonna know exactly why. It's important to remember that before Ashley bought the club, Newcastle United were a mid-table team on the verge of financial crisis, with their last good season coming all the way back in 2003 under Sir Bobby Robson, where they managed a 3rd place finish. This meant that they qualified for Champions League football, a travesty that they wouldn't replicate this feat for the next 20 years, considering their massive stature in the footballing world. This is a club that has won 4 league titles historically, more league titles than Tottenham Hotspur. Let that sink in. During the late 2000s, the club were a shadow of their former selves, but there was a sense of hope that Ashley could be the guy to turn the club's fortunes. After becoming club owner, Ashley was making game-changing decisions, reappointing club legend Kevin Keegan, someone seen as the perfect manager, not just by the board, but by the fans as well. And who could blame them? Keegan was the guy responsible for guiding the club to their first ever appearance in the Champions League since the 1970s. They managed this feat with a 3rd place finish in the league. By the end of Mike Ashley's first season, Keegan guided the club to a 12th place finish. A bit of a lackluster first season, not to mention the signings bought in the transfer window were underwhelming, but the fans remained optimistic. After all, it was only just his first season. Surely things would kick on in the 2nd season, but little did the fans know that behind the scenes things weren't as they seemed. Keegan grew frustrated by Ashley's business-minded approach to football. Keegan wasn't given the financial backing he needed to take the club back to their historic heights, and this created major disagreements between the two. In Ashley's first season, the club had an expenditure of almost 38 million euros on player transfers. But if you take a closer look, what should have been more concerning was that the club made a profit of 31 million euros on player sales. Considering the profit they made on player sales, there should have been an expectation for the club to be more ambitious, but this wasn't the case. Was this a sign of things to come? We're gonna find out. 8 months after taking the job, Kevin Keegan left the club in frustration, but this doesn't paint the picture on just how bad things were between Ashley and Keegan. Get this, upon Kevin Keegan's appointment as manager, there were promises made that he'd have full control over player transfers, but this wasn't true, with some reports going as far as saying that the sporting director at the time signed players without Kevin Keegan's approval. In retaliation to this betrayal, Keegan left the club, but he wasn't done. The next time Keegan and Ashley saw each other, it wouldn't be in the boardroom, but rather in court. That's right, Keegan sued the club for constructive dismissal, with Keegan having the last laugh as he was awarded $2 million in compensation. To be more accurate, Keegan brought a constructive dismissal case against Newcastle United and won in arbitration. After sacking Keegan, the board would go on to appoint 3 different managers in the exact same season, and towards the end of the season, Newcastle United were in serious contention for relegation. With just 8 games to go, Newcastle United in desperation bought in club legend Alan Shearer as a last-ditch effort to save the club from relegation. But come on, Alan Shearer came in as their 4th manager of the season. What chance did he have coming in as an inexperienced manager? And to the surprise of absolutely no one, he only managed 1 win in 8 games as manager. Unfortunately for the Newcastle United fans, the club was relegated for the first time in nearly 20 years. In just his 2nd season, Mike Ashley relegated the club that he was meant to save. This raised some doubts on whether he was the right owner to take the club moving forward. To make things worse, during the season, there were rumors that Ashley had been trying to sell the club, but this never materialized into anything significant. In the years prior to Newcastle United's first relegation, Ashley began showing his true intentions when he started using the club to promote a company he called Sports Direct. Sports Direct was a company under the ownership of Mike Ashley, and let's just say it doesn't bring many good memories for Newcastle United fans. But what was the problem? Surely this wasn't the first time a billionaire used a football club to promote a company that they owned. So what gives? The problem was that Ashley would promote Sports Direct below market value, sometimes even for free at the expense of the club. This meant that Newcastle United's commercial revenue underperformed compared to the other Premier League clubs. This meant the club couldn't fully financially compete in the league. To make things worse, Sports Direct were a company notorious for their poor working conditions for their workers, as well as known for offering 0-hour contracts. This not only went against everything the club and the fans stood for, but served as a reminder on just how far Ashley was willing to go in the pursuit of profit. After their relegation, Newcastle United needed just 1 year to get back to the Premier League, and the man responsible for guiding the club back to the top flight was Chris Hughton. Unfortunately, in just his 2nd season as manager, he was sacked, but this came as a shock to the footballing world, considering the club were in 11th place, a pretty solid position for a newly promoted team. This, however, didn't stop the board from replacing Chris Hughton with Alan Pardew. Now, why were the board sacking a guy who took the club from the Championship all the way to Premier League football? The real answer will surprise you. It was believed that Hughton was due for improved terms in his contract, as he was one of the lowest paid managers in the league, but some thought Ashley just didn't want to dig that deep and offer Chris Hughton a new contract, and instead opted to hire a new manager instead. From the media's perspective, it was said that the club needed a more experienced manager, and his eventual replacement Alan Pardew would fit that description perfectly. Throughout the years, multiple managers came forward describing just how difficult it was working under Ashley.
Yeah, the one thing about Mike Ashley, never tell you any shit.
Right.
Here's the pot of money we've got. This is what the club's earned this year. This is what we've got. It's not a lot, never is, but that's what we've got. So get on with it.
Alan Pardew arrived mid-season and guided the club to a boring mid-table finish. But it was in his 2nd season where things really got going. He led the club to a 5th place finish. This meant they qualified for European football in a move that took the entire league by storm. Keep in mind, this was the same season Newcastle United bought in both Demar Ba and Johan Kabay for less than €6 million. Players they would eventually sell for a profit, though Ashley may have been reluctant to spend money. When he eventually did, he almost never missed. With the money they got from European football, surely this would be the moment Newcastle United would kick on and reassert themselves in the race to be one of the top teams in the league. But this couldn't be any further away from the truth, and the following season proved exactly why. In the 2012 summer transfer window, Newcastle United had an expenditure of less than 11 million euros in a season the club played European football. By this point, the fans had finally grown tired of the club's lack of ambition. In a season Newcastle United fans should have dreamt of making Champions League football, they instead suffered through another disappointment. Despite spending very little in that year's summer transfer window, this didn't stop the team from making an appearance in the Europa League quarterfinals, but in the league it was a total disaster, with the club finishing in 16th place. The reason for such a poor finish in the league was mostly down to the team's lack of squad depth. Not to mention, managing European football with domestic competitions is no easy feat. If you thought the 2012 season was bad, the 2013-14 season was even worse. That season, less than 4 million euros was spent on player transfers throughout both windows. I'm not even kidding, look it up. But get this, the club made a profit of 25 million euros on player sales. They were making so much money, surely they bought in reinforcements. Not a chance. Apparently the club weren't able to find proper reinforcements in time, specifically referring to Johan Kabay, who left for PSG. Despite these challenging circumstances, Alan Pardew led the club to a 10th place finish. However, it doesn't take a genius to know that the cracks were forming behind the scenes, and the next season showed exactly that. Midway through the 2014-15 season, Pardew stepped down from his position as manager, and there was a growing divide between the board and the fans. To make things worse, this was around the time the club had Wonga as its shirt sponsor, a company known for offering short-term loans at extremely high interest rates, as well as exploiting people's financial situation. The city of Newcastle United are known for their working-class citizens, so the idea of the club having close ties to a company that could potentially exploit match-going fans didn't sit well in the eyes of many people. While other Premier League clubs were signing deals with global brands, Newcastle United were stuck tied to a controversial institution. This only further reinforced the idea that Ashley prioritized the profit over the club's values. And honestly, I don't think Alan Pardew was bothered by his dismissal after having to work under Ashley's strict financial restrictions. He even went on to say during an interview that Ashley had always been a strong character, but that he didn't understand how football works. After sacking Alan Pardew, the club finished the season in 15th place, 4 points away from the drop zone. It was only a matter of time before the club were relegated again. By the 2015-16 season, the pressure was on Mike Ashley. He had given an interview vowing to spend big in the transfer window after increased backlash from the fans. It didn't help the club had just scraped the relegation the previous season under manager John Carver. Despite a massive turnaround in the transfer window, with the club spending 107 million euros on player transfers, it was too little too late. The players bought in during the window failed to adapt to the Premier League. On top of that, an overall lack of experience in the squad didn't help Newcastle United. The result, the club were relegated for the second time in just 7 years. Despite a catastrophic season, the manager at the time, Refa Benitez, who was expected to leave by the end of the season, stayed true to the fans by choosing to stay on for the following season, giving the fans a glimmer of hope in such a dire time for the club. Just as they did before, it only took one season for Newcastle United to get back to the Premier League, but this time it was different. The fans had a manager they felt could bring back the glory days back to St. James's Park. In their first season back in the top flight, Refa led the club to a 10th place finish, but you guessed it, the same problems still remained. The owner Mike Ashley failed to deliver the players Refa needed to improve the squad. By the end of Refa's third full season in charge, despite support from the fans, he was finally fed up with Mike Ashley and the board and left the club. By this point, the fans were pushed to their limits and began protesting against the board. The protests served as a symbol of the fans rejecting the direction the club was headed. No one could blame the fans for rejecting a board that replaced Refa Benitez with Steve Bruce. The protests had nothing to do with Steve Bruce. He was just a guy caught up in the crossfire. After 14 years, in 2021, Ashley finally sold the club to the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, and that was that. I'm doing a video on how Newcastle United went from relegation to Champions League football, so stay tuned for that. Ashley saw Newcastle United as an invaluable asset and saw the chance to capitalize on the club's loyal and passionate fan base. He cleared the club's debt and saw the club as the perfect platform to promote his company Sports Direct. His biggest mistake was thinking that the fans would sit back and let him do as he pleased. The fans eventually grew tired and turned against Ashley. Though he did keep ticket prices affordable and made smart transfers, it ultimately just didn't work out. But it was Ashley who had the last laugh as he sold the club for double what he paid for in 2007. If you guys did like this video, check out this one where I discuss how Everton went from Champions League football to constant relegation battles in the Premier League. If you guys did like the video, click subscribe. I will see you in the next one.